Luis Castillo has been the subject of trade talks for the last day or so, with one reporter even saying it's almost a certainty he's dealt. Colby and I will dive into these rumors coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Thursday, December 12th, 2024. This is Tony Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Luis Castillo, who, by the way, happy birthday, Luis, is apparently a hot name on the trade market right now. We're going to talk about why, where he could go, and what the Mariners are looking to accomplish by trading him. But before we get into all that, shout out to our title sponsor today, Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. All you have to do to check that out, just click the link in the description of this episode. So I am going to try and do my best to recap what happened yesterday, pretty much right after I edited yesterday's episode. Hop back on my phone, get a text from Colby saying, be on standby for an emergency pod. He sends a couple of tweets, one from John Morosi, saying that the Red Sox are working to acquire one of the Mariners pitchers. And then another one from MLB insider Mike Rodriguez that says the Mariners are talking about Luis Castillo with teams, and it's almost a certainty that the Mariners trade him. Then Adam Jude starts talking about it, says that the Red Sox and the Mariners are engaged in trade talks for Luis Castillo, and mentions Tristan Casas as a possibility on that front. Ryan Divish confirms that and starts tweeting about it as well. Daniel Kramer reports that as well, along with a report that the Mariners are talking to free agent first baseman Christian Walker. So a lot was happening. At the end of it,
all came out in about an hour and a half too.
Yeah, this was a lot to keep up with in a short amount of time. At the end of that, though, no trade was made. And as of now, no trade has been made. We'll see if that lasts before we post this episode. Knowing our luck, who knows? But yeah, a lot came out. There was also, what was the reporter? Alex Spire from the Boston area. I don't know what publication he's from, but he also, he reported that he reached out to one of his sources, asked them about a Luis Castillo, Tristan Casas deal, if that had any legs to it. And the source said straightforward no. So
definitely no reason for him to lie.
Sure. So we're going to get into all the teams that were mentioned. There were quite a few of them. And we're going to kind of do an abbreviated version of what we did on the Patreon show yesterday and kind of eliminate some teams here, like who makes sense, who really doesn't, that got mentioned. And then we'll also dive into the first base aspect of this, because obviously Casas gets mentioned, Christian Walker gets mentioned yesterday. And then also Ryan Divish was on Jason Puckett's show yesterday and said that the Mariners want to try and get something done with Carlos Santana within the next week. So a lot of first basemen being thrown around with the Mariners. So we'll get into that a little later on. But Colby, just general reaction to the Mariners now seemingly getting pretty serious about trading Luis Castillo.
Yeah. I think this is a direct reaction to the market really exploding for starting pitching. I mean, you look at the free agency, what's going on there. Luis Severino is getting $21 million a year. Nathan Eovaldi just got 3 years and $75 million. It's been reported that Sean Manaea is likely to exceed that number himself. And these are all guys who are good quality pitchers, but they don't have the same track record as Luis Castillo, and they're making more money over the next 3 years than Castillo is going to. So I think what this is teams looking out at free agency and going like, wow, after Corbin Burns signs, there's Mania and there's a couple other decent arms out there, but then it gets ugly pretty quick. And even if we want to dive into that market, Alex Cobb is getting $15 million. Like Matt Boyd is getting $29 million. Like that's a big risk when we could just pay $10 million more and have the floor and ceiling of a Luis Castillo, who's not making, like we've been saying all winter, Luis Castillo's contract is a bargain. What he would get on the open market right now is laughable compared to what he's actually making. And so I think what you're seeing now is you're seeing teams really kind of have a full understanding of what the market is. And they're going to the Mariners with offers or ideas that are significantly more than the Mariners thought was possible for them to get 8 weeks ago for Castillo specifically. And let's be very clear about this. There are zero rumors about Kirby, Gilbert, Miller, Wu. All we've heard consistently is they're not interested in trading any of those guys. Castillo is the only one. And that makes sense because as we've talked about, Castillo is kind of in his own separate category from the other pitchers. You don't want to trade him. But if the market is going to pay you that Godfather offer, you can't deny the benefits of having a little bit of extra money, potentially. And you can't, just ignore an avenue of possibly getting better if that's your best shot. And I think what the Mariners look at in free agency, I don't think they're huge fans of this free agent class to begin with, but even the guys they are interested in, people are getting paid right now, right? And so I think they're just trying to look around and this is an opportunity for them to take advantage of a market that may not be around next time they go to try and trade Luis Castillo, which would probably be next winter when his trade clause expires. So I think this is just a reaction. And I think what's happening here is that the Mariners are feeling out the market. They like the responses they've gotten, and they've kept their asking price pretty high. And teams are at least starting to approach the level that the Mariners would strongly consider making this move. So I think that's what's happened. I think this is a reaction to the market. And instead of being just, dead set, like, no, we're not interested. It's like, well, if the market dictates that we can get X for Luis Castillo, we'll do it. Because, again, as we say, and if you've ever read the book Moneyball, right? One of the rules of trading, know how much every player in baseball is worth to you. You can put value on it. Know how much Luis Castillo is worth to you. If somebody's willing to give you that, you have to consider it.
Yeah, and there's a very specific criteria that has to be met here in order for the Mariners to feel comfortable trading Castillo. Now, we don't know exactly what that is, but I think we can take an educated guess, which is, one, you get a proven major leaguer back who addresses one of your needs on, the position player front. Two, you get the team acquiring Luis Castillo to take on most, if not all, of the contract. And frankly, there is a precedent now for that team to not only give you a proven major leaguer, but also take on all of that contract because of what just happened with the Blue Jays and the Guardians. The Blue Jays just took on the entire contract of Andres Gimenez, who obviously is a couple of years removed from a 6-win season and is an elite defender, but there are massive red flags with the bat. They still gave up Spencer Horwitz, who was a really good major leaguer this past year and wound up getting flipped to Pittsburgh for a legit, number 4 starter and a couple of interesting prospects.
Yeah.
So the Mariners, however, have Luis Castillo, who, he's experienced some regression over the last year. He did get hurt. It wasn't a serious injury.
Not an arm injury either. Important to note.
But I think it would be too aggressive to say that there are red flags with Luis Castillo. Yes, he's north of 30, what have you, but I don't see anything in Luis Castillo's profile that makes me concerned about him, at least in the short term. And at 3 years, $73 million, compared to what some of these other pitchers are getting right now, that's a massive bargain. So I believe that there has been a precedent set now in the league for whoever acquires Castillo to take on all of that contract and give up something pretty valuable to the Mariners. And I think that's really the only way this works for Seattle. is if they can accomplish both of those things, because it's becoming very apparent that they're not able to do what they want to do, what they set out to do this offseason with the restrictions that they have right now, which are obviously self-imposed. But like last year, the front office has to do what it feels it has to do to try and build the roster that it wants to build. And yeah, to me, it just seems like they're hitting some brick walls. So it's partly that. It's also, look at how much the market has boomed, and now options are starting to run thin on the high end of the starting pitching market for other teams. So let's try and take advantage of this. Now, Castillo isn't the only big name being thrown out there in the trade market. Jesus Luzardo is potentially out there. Jared Jones and Mitch Keller of the Pirates are potentially out there. They've been named. And there's probably some other names that either I'm missing or, Dylan Cease is someone that got thrown out yesterday by, I believe, John Heyman, which who knows, but and, there might be some other names that either I'm missing or, we don't know are available. So it's an interesting situation that the Mariners find themselves in, because on one hand, you want to try and wait it out as much as possible. So teams, so like Corbin Burns signs and teams even get more desperate, right? But also, you don't want the market to pass you by, and some of these other teams that are looking for starting pitching help then go ahead and trade for, Luzardo or Jared Jones or Mitch Keller or whoever. And also, the free agents that you might want to spend that money that you saved by trading Castillo on, they might sign. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a very interesting balancing act to see the Mariners take on. And but it seems, by all accounts, it seems like Luis Castillo, very real possibility, he's thrown his last pitch in a Mariners uniform.
Yeah, and I can't. Let's just say the reports and everything that's come from this, the people who are reporting these things, feel pretty good about their information. So this doesn't feel like it's, your kind of standard winter, like the Yapper may have stumbled onto something here that's legitimate. It doesn't feel like this is just talk. These are very specific details that are coming out. Once potential trade packages start to get leaked, things are moving in that direction. And so, I'm at the point now where if the Mariners play this correctly, then Luis Castillo probably isn't on the opening. I think if Luis Castillo is on the opening day roster for the Mariners, they made a miscalculation in the market, because I think their intention now, based on what I've read and other stuff, I think their intention now is to try and trade Luis Castillo, and I think the market is there for them to capitalize on that idea, where I wasn't sure it was a couple weeks ago.
So quite a few potential landing spots were put out there yesterday with all these reports. You and I on our Patreon show, we went through every single one of them, and a couple of them make quite a bit of sense. Quite a few of them don't really make any sense at all, though. So we're going to dive into that in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So again, quite a few potential landing spots for Luis Castillo were put out there amongst all the reports yesterday. These teams include, of course, the Boston Red Sox, like we talked about with the whole Tristan Casas thing, the Cubs, the Mets, the Yankees, the Orioles, the Phillies. Is that everyone? There were a lot of reports yesterday, but I believe those are the main teams that were reported. So, let's just kind of go through each one of these and maybe also talk about some other teams that make sense that weren't mentioned.
Before we do that, we should lay out what appears to be the parameters of what the Mariners are looking for.
Sure.
With Luis Castillo. And you talked about it a little bit in the first segment, but I think the specific criteria, like obviously an overarching like criteria for the Mariners is how do you replace Luis Castillo?
Right.
Because we've talked about this. It can't be with Hancock. Like that's just not, no. It has to be somebody better than that. So take him off the board. Take that one off the board. But that's a very important one. But I think just specifically about this Castillo trade, I think number one, like you mentioned, you have to get 2025 help if you're trading Luis Castillo.
You have to address one of your positional needs.
Right.
Yeah.
And that specifically means an infielder. So I think when we look at
Divish, I believe it was Divish in his article, straight up said like they're looking for MLB infielders for Castillo.
Yes. Somebody had speculated, it might have been Jude this time around, that said that the Red Sox Mariners trade was like Casas and a prospect for Castillo. So
I believe that was also in Divish's article.
Right. So they're kind of working together on this one. So just keep that in mind. Number one, they have to get 2025 help. Number two, it has to be at a position of need, which for the Mariners is first, second, third. And number three, I think this is a somewhat important one. The team has to be willing to eat most of, if not all, the contracts. Like you laid out in the first segment, right? Mm-hmm. Those are the criteria the Mariners have to hit, and they have to hit all three. And again, to me, the bigger criteria than all of that is how do you replace Luis Castillo? But we'll shelve that conversation for if and when they actually trade Luis Castillo.
Sure.
So when you're looking at these teams that we're going to talk about, keep that in mind. Can they offer you all those things?
So let's start with Boston. What do you think about Tristan Casas?
I think he's a pretty good hitter. I don't think he's a great hitter. I think that Boston is trying to sell him as though he's like a, future MVP level type of hitter.
Boston fans certainly are.
Right. I don't think he's that. I think he's probably a 120-ish WRC plus guy, which is good. Like, again, he just seems Randy Arozarena like at the plate to me. Like that's what I see in him.
It feels like they're trying to sell him as like the next Matt Olson, which from a defensive standpoint, he is not at all. He is not at all.
He's not going to hit 50 home runs like Olson did. He's probably closer to a 30 home run power guy. The strikeouts are not high, but they're not low. Like he is.
I mean, he struck out like 31% of the time this year.
Last year they were high, but typically he's around 23 to 25%.
Yes.
Which you can live with, especially for my power hitting first baseman. He hits a lot better at Fenway than he does on the road, like a lot better. Now that's not that unusual, but it is something worth noting. The strikeouts are something worth noting. But you get him for 4 years. He's going to be 25, I believe. He's still
pre-arb for 1 year.
Right. He's got one season under his belt, one full season under his belt. He was very good at the plate that year. Not a 2-win player, though, because the defense is that bad, but first base defense is also very hard to quantify. So Casas, I think, is a good hitter, and I think he would hit fine at T-Mobile Park. That's a guess, obviously. We don't know. I think he is a very nice solution to first base if that's what you get.
Yeah, so he's going to be 25. Again, he's not making any money. And if you trade Castillo to the Red Sox and they're taking on all the contracts, we've assumed that they have about $15 to $20 million right now to spend. So you would add another 24 on top of that. You can do some damage with that. And you already have one. Right. That's the other element to that. But, if you have that money, theoretically, you can do some damage with that, especially when you already have one of your needs addressed with Casas. Right. So that's really interesting. Let's talk about the Cubs. It's the usual suspects who we've talked about over the last week or so. Nico Horner is the first guy that comes to mind. There's also Isak Paredes, Seiya Suzuki, who I don't really think works. And also, again, the Mariners are apparently looking for infielders, not outfielders, not just bats, right? So
specifically infielders.
So it's probably either Horner or Paredes on this front. and it's probably most likely Nico Horner.
Right. Now the Cubs are also talking to the Astros about Kyle Tucker, so that's a whole thing as well. And if they trade Paredes to the Astros, then they're probably not trading Horner. But do the Cubs have the headliner type of infielder that you need to complete a deal? Yeah, they have one. The difference here between them and Boston is that Horner is making $11 million. So you're not eating all of that salary. So it's less ideal. So basically do you value the scarcity of the position or the value of the player more or the money more? Because while Casas is a better hitter than Horner, Horner is a better player overall than Casas. And he's making $11 million. He's still, that's very good bargain. Like that's not anything you can't absorb. And you would still clear like $10 million-ish, $13 million, somewhere in that range, if you just traded Castillo for Horner straight up. So you're still clearing some money. You're just not clearing $23 million. So yeah, the Cubs are interesting. They do have a headliner that makes sense for Seattle and what they're looking for. The money would not be quite as, you wouldn't save as much money as you would if the Red Sox deal is Casas for Castillo or whatever. But yeah, the Cubs are definitely a team that makes sense here. They have a headliner that Seattle would probably take.
I think because of the money, I probably also need like Javier Assad back in the deal, Jordan Wicks.
Right, and the Cubs probably don't have a problem giving you Assad if they're getting Luis Castillo.
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to get into the teams that make less sense. Let's start with the Orioles. You're not getting Jordan Westburg for Luis Castillo. That's too much for Baltimore to give up. Would be great. I'd do backflips if you could get Jordan Westburg for Luis Castillo, but that's not happening. So at that point, I'm struggling to find a headliner here.
Right, because obviously it's not going to be Gunnar Henderson.
Yeah.
It's not going to be Westburg. And so you look around and you say, okay, well, Colby Mayo is a great prospect who did play in the majors a little bit last year. It didn't go well at all for him. So is that a good enough headliner, a guy with no major league success? Like Mayo, the talent is certainly, worth Luis Castillo. Yeah. But does he specifically fill the need that the Mariners have laid out? Is he actually help for your 2025 roster? We don't know.
Right.
You're guessing that he is, right? And that's a risk. And there's nobody at first. There's nobody at second. Like Jackson Holiday is the same thing.
Ryan Mountcastle, solid player. He's not good enough to be a headliner in a Luis Castillo deal, though.
No, neither is Heston Kierstad. He's an outfielder/DH. He doesn't fit either. So, yeah, I think when you look at the Orioles, that's one of those teams where you kind of need co-headliners. Or you need it needs to be Mayo and somebody who you feel really confident can help you in 2025. And at that point, are the Orioles interested?
Yeah, like would the Orioles do Mayo and Mountcastle? I have a hard time seeing it.
Yeah, that feels a bit heavy.
Yeah.
So
now, could you do Mayo and Mountcastle for Castillo and Harry Ford?
Sure. Maybe.
Would you do that?
No. Well,
yeah.
No, I don't trust Mayo to help me in 2025. Like I want a piece. If I'm trading Luis Castillo, I want the headliner to be somebody who I feel really confident is going to help me in 2025. Maybe the Mariners do feel that way about Mayo. I don't imagine they're going to feel that way about any other prospect in that system. And again, they're not getting Holiday. They're not getting Henderson. They're not getting Westburg, nor should they ask for any of those guys. I mean, well, maybe Holiday, but they have no business asking for Westburg or Henderson. So yeah, I don't see the Orioles as a great fit. I really don't. So
yeah. So the Phillies, they're going to try and just offer you Alec Boehm for Luis Castillo, and that's when you hang up the phone because no,
Boehm is not a headliner.
Boehm, I like him. I don't love him. I like him. He would be a fine answer at third base, take a shot.
Possibly.
But again, from May onward, the guy was a 96 WRC plus hitter. He was slightly below average. And then there's like this significant uptick in defense. How real is that? Because defensive metrics, they're not the most trustworthy. And we only have a year of data that says that he's an actual above average third baseman.
Right. Plus the Phillies rotation's pretty good as is.
Yeah. Do they even need Luis Castillo? That's kind of my question. Cause they have Wheeler, they have Nola, they have Sanchez, they have Suarez, and Andrew Painter seems like he's about ready to go here pretty soon.
Also, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe the Phillies were mentioned because, maybe Luis Castillo, that's a team Luis Castillo might waive his no trade clause. Maybe that's the only reason they were mentioned. Cause I look at that roster and I go like, there's not a headliner. Like, this is a situation you need co-headliners in this deal. And like, even if they come in, they're like, hey, do you want Brandon Marsh, who we know they're shopping, and Alec Boehm? Marsh doesn't really do much for the Mariners, and Boehm is a question mark. Like, they could always flip, Marsh, or try to. And again, we're not even discussing the possibility of 3-team deals yet.
Yeah.
But just no need to complicate it. Straight up, Phillies, a match for Castillo. I don't see one. Not one that I'm comfortable with, though, because if they I'd rather just have $3 million less saved on that contract and acquire Nico Horner than I would to acquire Alec Boehm.
Mm. So the New York teams, the Yankees, I don't think they have anything to make a Castillo deal happen. If you're looking for major league infielders, they're not trading Volpe, and they're probably not trading Jazz. So, yeah, and they have their own infield issues right now, as is.
Plus, their pitching staff is actually pretty good right now. It's their offense that needs a lot of help.
Yeah. I don't even see a need for Castillo in their rotation. So their inclusion in the reports is a little weird to me.
I don't know who hits cleanup for the Yankees if the season started tomorrow.
Yeah. So. Now there's been rumors that the Astros want Luis Gil, but even then, I feel like the Yankees have enough starting pitching depth to survive that, especially after signing Max Fried. The Mets, kind of interesting, but it really comes down to just one guy, right? Mark Vientos.
Or
no, we're not doing the Brett Beatty thing.
Fill in the blank. Oh, you said it. Fill in the blank in the comment section.
I'm not doing this.
Yeah, it's pretty much Vientos because, obviously you're not getting the rest of that infield. Alonso's not there anymore. You're not getting Francisco Lindor. That'd be hilarious, though. I don't even know who's playing. So Jeff McNeil, is he still playing second? No, absolutely not. So yeah, it's Vientos, and don't see it. So yeah. I mean, the Mariners apparently had interest in Brandon Nimmo, but again, outfielder. We're looking specifically for infielders. So the Mets don't make a ton of sense for me either.
Yeah. So to me, of the teams that have been named, it's the Red Sox and the Cubs. Mm-hmm. Then I have a hard time seeing it with the other ones. The Braves do make a lot of sense. They weren't mentioned. They do make a lot of sense, though. If they are willing to trade either Matt Olson, now obviously that would be pretty much a wash in terms of the money. I think he would even be adding some money, right?
A little bit.
Yeah.
But addressing a big need.
Or Ozzie Albies. But they have their own middle infield issues, so probably not. But they have, after losing Max Fried, they have Chris Sale, just won a Cy Young. They should be getting Spencer Strider back at some point. And then quite a few question marks. I mean, Ronaldo Lopez had a good year, but can he do it again? And then they have, a bunch of prospects who are good prospects, don't get me wrong. Yep. But yeah, that team, for what it probably hopes to accomplish in 2025, could use some established starting pitching.
Yeah. I just don't think you can get Albies. The contract is so good. But that would be the guy of everybody we talked about. I would be most excited if the Mariners could somehow get Ozzie Albies, but I don't see that. So yeah, the Braves, kind of interesting. It does feel like in a traditional 1-for-1 type of trade here that the Cubs and the Red Sox are the two best suitors here.
Yeah. So again, a lot of first basemen were thrown around yesterday in the rumor mill regarding the Mariners. So we're going to dive into that and try and figure out what's going on that front in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Gametime. So I used to live in New Mexico, and down in New Mexico, there are 0 pro sports teams, and a lot of bands and artists that I listen to skip going there more often than not. So when I moved to Toronto, where there's a baseball team, a basketball team, a hockey team, even a soccer team, and there's great music being played every night in the city, I was right in my element. When I want to catch a ball game or my wife and I want to see a band, I always get my tickets through Gametime. And that was the case well before Gametime sponsored our network and before I even joined the network, because it is truly the best ticketing service out there, hands down. I truly believe that. And now it's getting even better thanks to Gametime Picks. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I can just go on the app, it'll show me the best deal right away, it'll show me the exact view I'll have, and most importantly, it'll tell me exactly what I'm going to pay with Gametime's all-in pricing, so there are no annoying little fees that pop up at the last second. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, that's LOCKEDONMLB, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. So again, yesterday, basically at the same exact time that the Luis Castillo rumors came out, Daniel Kramer reported that the Mariners have talked to Christian Walker. I know the Mariners really like him, but this is a pricey venture, and this might be why they're all of a sudden more open to trading Luis Castillo. These two things might very well be connected. I mean, considering that they were both reported at essentially the same time, doesn't feel like coincidence to me. But then you also have the Tristan Casas report. And then you have, Divish going on Jason Puckett's show yesterday and saying that they want to try and get something done with Carlos Santana within the next week. So there are a bunch of potential reasons for this. There are a bunch of potential outcomes involving first base here. A couple of possibilities that are kind of swimming through my mind right now is that two of these guys are being leveraged for the other. I just don't know which one. Or the Mariners are actually serious about adding a full-time DH.
Yeah. What's interesting about that with the three guys that we're talking about here is that Santana and Walker are elite defensive first basemen. Now, I say elite, with the not Evan White clause.
They've won Gold Gloves though.
Right. They're very good over there defensively. So if those are the two, it's okay, who's DHing? And the Mariners have never, or at least, since the post Nelson Cruz era, the Mariners really don't want a full-time DH, but they tried it last year with Mitch Garver and it didn't work. So I wonder if that's just something they see as value, that DHs are going to make a little bit less money than other position players. But if you're, Walker, you're certainly not taking DH money. You're a Gold Glove first baseman. So yeah, it's interesting specifically with those three guys that two of them are not guys you'd want to DH. And then also if you do acquire more of a full-time DH, okay, that means Robles or Rayleigh is on the bench every single day. Now it's not like they're going to sit there for 5-6 days in a row. I mean, they'll cycle through other positions and all that stuff. I'm not saying you should have a full-time DH, but it's you want to get Luke Rayleigh at bats against right-handed pitching, certainly. Right. And do you want to bench Robles? Was great against right-handed pitching too last year.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of manage that early in the season as you try and get everybody enough at bats? So yeah, it's an interesting little thing here that the Mariners, the bats that they have been linked to this week, all of them are first basemen. And
there's also, and look, it's John Heyman, but at the very least, he is plugged into some New York stuff. He did mention the Mariners as one of the teams in on Pete Alonso, along with the Nationals and the Mets. So
sure.
it's possible.
Jeff Passan also said that the market for Pete Alonso right now doesn't exist.
Right.
Nobody is.
So I'm just putting that out there to say that maybe the Mariners have their sights set on doing something bigger at first base.
We've talked about this, earlier in the offseason. It's really weird that the Mariners seem to commit to either Santana or Turner early on when the place they were most likely to find significant offensive upgrades to this lineup was at first base. The free agent class was deeper there. There were more trade options there. Obviously, they're much better. There are much better options at first base than there are at third base. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we talked about that. How it was kind of weird that it's like, yeah, they're just keying in on these two guys who are good players. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's like, you know, if you really want to add some thump, you're probably going to have to do it at first base. That's your best spot, and that's where you have the most opportunity. And they seem to want to ignore that. But now, again, in the last 3 days, they've been linked by credible reports to Pete Alonso. Although that one again, Heyman, credible, yeah. It is a New York team though, like a New York player.
Yeah.
So we'll call that half credible. Sure. We'll go with, and then you have Christian Walker, and then obviously Carlos Santana and Kramer and
Tristan Casas.
Yeah, and Adam Jude threw in Casas. So, I'm not going to start doubting those guys when they say the Mariners have talked to these guys or that they're interested in these guys. I believe them. So all of them first basemen though. So it's all of them kind of, at different levels too of like the economic scale. You have the guy making league minimum. You have the guy who's going to make, I don't know, $5-6 million. You have the guy who's going to make $18-19 million, maybe 20. And you have a guy who's going to make, he thinks he's going to make $25 million a year in Pete Alonso, but doesn't seem like too many teams are that interested right now. So yeah, just all over the map, but they're all first basemen, and that's interesting to say the least.
Yeah. So let's say you get Tristan Casas, right? Mm-hmm. And then again, this is assuming that the Mariners are willing to spend all the money that they free up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And
we know who pocket that money's going right into.
And that they're actually, that they would actually view it as like they're adding the Castillo money on top of, the 15 to 20 million that's been projected. So you have Casas who doesn't cost anything, right? All right. So at the very least, I've addressed DH, right? Or first base. Mm-hmm. But it's possible that you could pull off Tristan Casas, Christian Walker, Hai-Sung Kim, if you want to take that shot.
I mean, with the $40 million, again, it does feel like you're going to have to spend some of that on a pitcher.
So that's where I was going with this. So, you could still address, second or third, maybe both, depending on how much Kim would make or whatever. Right. Or you could, address one of the spots, maybe get a reliever, and then a couple of names that I would keep an eye on pitching wise would be via trade, and they're number fives who are making like $7-8 million. Aaron Savali with the Brewers, Merrill Kelly of the Diamondbacks.
I would also say that there might be a scenario where you can get Jordan Montgomery and you could get the Diamondbacks to take on a contract and then
Mitch Haniger.
Right. Like Haniger and Tyler Locklear, right, for Jordan Montgomery. And if you acquire Tristan Casas, you definitely don't need Locklear. I don't know, maybe the Diamondbacks are looking for a long-term Christian Walker, or somebody they feel like could be Christian Walker in the future. And so, yeah, I do think something like that. And that would be acquiring Jordan Montgomery, but only acquiring $7 million of his salary. So stuff like that is definitely possible. Obviously the Roki Sasaki thing is part of this too, though, because, it sounds like part of their big pitch to Sasaki was going to be, we're going to be a 6-man rotation and nobody's going to have to skip a beat because all 6 of you are like really good. So it's not like the teams, we're not going to win as much because we're doing a 6-man rotation. Well, if you trade Castillo,
but if you're the Mariners and you don't have some sort of like wink, nudge agreement with Sasaki that he's going to sign with you by January 15th, then you need to do something in the event that you're not going to get him.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a little interesting thing there because I think we talked about this on CTZ yesterday, our Patreon show, patreon.com/control the zone, I believe.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
I always get the slash and the backslash wrong. I think specifically in the Roki Sasaki realm, this Luis Castillo trade talk you can kind of make it say whatever you want. Like, oh, the Mariners think they're getting Sasaki, that's why they're willing to trade Luis Castillo. Or you could be like, well, the Mariners know they're not getting Sasaki now, so they don't have to worry about the 6-man rotation. So that's why they're trading Castillo or trying to. So, it can kind of make the argument either way there. And I do think that Castillo and Roki Sasaki are linked somehow, either way. Yeah. I think we have to, just because of what we heard about what the Mariners pitch was going to be and blah, blah, blah.
So basically what I want to know from you guys in the comments below, if you're up to you, would you rather just a very simple, straightforward offseason where the Mariners sign Carlos Santana and like Hai-Sung Kim, or they trade for Nico Horner and they sign, a Paul Sewald type of reliever and that's it? And we're removing Roki from the equation here for a moment. Or would you rather that they trade Luis Castillo, sign Christian Walker, maybe acquire, Tristan Casas or Nico Horner in the process? Maybe acquire like a Merrill Kelly type, what have you. Would you rather they do that? Or would you rather that they just keep Castillo and, see what they can get out of Santana and maybe take a shot on Kim, or,
would you
get
rather
Horner?
They have a major upgrade at first base while significantly downgrading the rotation? Or would you rather have basically the team they ran with last year? That same situation. And obviously, Julio could be better, blah, blah, blah. Like,
Yeah.
You have Randy for the whole year, Robles for the whole year, blah, 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 blah. Like, we're not saying that it's like the team would only win 85 games if they just brought in Santana, but just, similar lineup to the end of last year, not the beginning, the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let us know down in the comments below what you think.
Fan Fiction Friday tomorrow?
Fan Fiction Friday is tomorher. We'll be putting the tweet out.
Let's see how many non-Luis Castillo trades we can throw out there.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Because last week it was all Cubs. So
yeah, I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of Red Sox. A lot of Luis Castillo, a lot of Red Sox.
Let me just nip this in the bud right now. No, you cannot get Rafael Devers.
And we are
cannot get Jarren Duran.
And at most, we're putting up 2 Red Sox Castillo trades.
Yeah, so they better be good.
Yeah. So the tweet for that will be up soon, or if you're on Blue Sky, we'll also have.
Just remember, if you guys don't come with the good trades this week, we have a whole lot left over from last week's mailbag that just didn't make the cut.
That's true. That's true.
So
That's true.
Step your game up.
I actually would like to dive into a couple of those.
That's what I'm saying. We might recycle half of those. So we'll see. You guys better. And by the way, if you submitted one last week that didn't make the cut, feel free to resubmit. I don't think anything happened that would make that So, but anyways.
All right. So that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.